NBC News seems to think that new revelations about an indicted FBI informant have retroactively justified their treatment of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was widely suppressed by the media after numerous intelligence officials said that it resembled Russian misinformation. Let's see if we can follow their logic. The indicted FBI informant is Alexander Smirnov, who allegedly hid his close connections to Russian intelligence and lied about Hunter and Joe Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. Smirnov told the FBI in June of 2020 that executives at Ukrainian energy firm Burisma had previously paid Hunter and Joe Biden nearly $5 million each. Smirnov claimed that one executive justified the payments to have Hunter Biden, quote, protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems. Prosecutors are saying that Smirnov only did routine business dealings with the company in 2017 and made the bribery allegations after he, quote, expressed bias against President Biden while Biden was running for president. Now, Democrats quickly called for Republicans to drop impeachment proceedings against President Biden, with Congressman Jamie Raskin saying that the investigation was, quote, over. Take a look.
And I wanted to just start by restating the obvious, which is that the impeachment investigation essentially ended yesterday in substance, if not in form, with the explosive revelation that Mr. Smirnov's allegations about Ukrainian Burisma payments to Joe Biden were concocted along with Russian intelligence agents. And it appears like the whole thing is not only obviously false and fraudulent, but a product of Russian disinformation and propaganda.
Republicans tried to tamp down on concerns that this was a death blow to their investigation during a recent interview on Newsmax. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer claimed, quote, at the end of the day, he wasn't an important part of the investigation because I didn't even know who he was. All I knew was there was a 1023 form that alleged bribery. My investigation's about all the money the Bidens have taken from China, from Romania, from Kazakhstan. This guy had absolutely nothing to do with it. We got a tip. We investigated it. We couldn't figure out who it was. Comer later released a statement saying the investigation would, in fact, continue.
Now, as Robby mentioned earlier, the group of U.S. intelligence officials who claimed that Russian misinformation was behind the Hunter laptop story have taken a victory lap. NBC News ran an article titled, Former U.S. Spies Warned in 2020 that the Hunter Biden scandal had Russian fingerprints. They feel vindicated now, that claim the materials in the laptop, quote, fueled stories consistent with Russian efforts to accuse Biden of corruption that persist to this day, and that therefore were justified in sounding the alarm.
So this is an interesting bit of, I think, rewriting history here, frankly, that the NBC News article was doing. They seem to be saying, look, we found someone who made an allegedly false tip about the Bidens and who is alleged by the FBI to have talked to Russian intelligence. We don't know about what. We don't know exactly when. The FBI said it was around that same time period. But so NBC News is taking this as evidence that, okay, so back when in 2016, or no, excuse me, in 2020, when the laptop story came out and all the intelligence officials said this looks like Russian information, and then Politico, actually went a step further and said they're saying it is Russian misinformation, even though that wasn't exactly what the intelligence officials said, and then it was ignored in the mainstream media and suppressed on social media on this recommendation. That action, which has widely now been seen as a bad series of events to have occurred, is retroactively justified because here's an example of someone who did, in fact, or who's alleged by the FBI to have spread Russian-based misinformation, to have injected that into the kind of Biden family stuff, which to me doesn't follow whatsoever because, again, the Hunter Biden laptop story no one has ever shown any way in which it was motivated by, in which there was Russian involvement. It seems like he left the laptop at the store and the guy came forward and gave it to Republican political campaign officials.
What the implication was at the time was that you shouldn't trust that the contents of the laptop were authentic. The characterization of the laptop as misinformation seemed to suggest that we don't know if the laptop itself belonged to Hunter Biden, whether or not it was fraudulently stolen from him as opposed to just left at the store, whether or not we should believe anything coming from the laptop itself. And the letter signed by 51 former intelligence officials was taken as almost proof that it was in fact not legitimate information on the laptop itself, regardless of what you take from it, that information wasn't legitimate. And what's interesting is this NBC News article then goes and picks out the caveating language from within that initial 51 intelligence officer report and says, well, look, they always said that, quote, we want to emphasize we do not know if the emails are genuine or not and do not have evidence of Russian involvement. You know, they always said we don't know for sure that there's Russian involvement, but now it's validated, when in fact, the framing of that article and the title of that article was taken up and run with by the news media, the liberal news media, generally speaking, as proof positive that there was nothing authentic about the laptop.
And by Biden himself. When he defended himself and his son against these charges in his debate with Trump, he cited that letter from those intelligence officials.
Nobody cared about the caveats in the letter at the time, saying, well, we don't actually know if this is real or not. It was used as proof. And so now using this revisionist history where it's like everyone was so careful at the time. We all dotted our I's and crossed our T's, but this now is new confirmation that we were always right to be skeptical of the provenance of the laptop. Well, it doesn't say anything about that. But there's this bigger issue, right, about whether or not the something core to the Republicans' claim about there being a bribery scheme here is now undermined by someone who made a really clear and arguably compelling bribery claim at the time as a trusted FBI witness for 10 years. Him now having his credibility undermined by this relationship, which hasn't really been unpacked very far, but this relationship apparently that he has with Russian intelligence officials, does that still go to the heart of the Republicans' claim here that there was some kind of pay-to-play scheme? Yeah.
We need to hear more about the detail, what evidence the FBI or what prosecutors, because they're charging him with lying to authorities, you know, what I would like to see more of what they actually have to prove that. I am not incredulous. I'm not saying I'm not rejecting that. That could very well be the case. Maybe they have compelling evidence that it is the case, that he did talk to Russian intelligence, that he had anti-Biden animus, and so then he kind of like invented or exaggerated claims about his knowledge of them and their business dealings. I am not rejecting any of that. That could be totally plausible to me, and I would like to see what evidence they have to marshal that. Now, we do also know that, you know, lying to federal investigators is a, frankly, easy crime to commit if they're out to entrap you for having done such things. So is it one of those situations, or can they materially contradict what he said, and can they demonstrate that what he said had to do with conversations he had with Russian intelligence? Again, that might well be the case, and maybe it undermines the Comer investigation or the impeachment proceedings. Again, impeachment proceedings, which I don't think, even with this, had been borne out enough to take. Now, you can continue to investigate it. Maybe this knocks one of the pegs down, but of course, we can't just, you know, take the FBI at their word. We have to see what they have and where's their proof that he made this kind of accusation up.
Yeah, for all that, there's discourse around whether or not Trump's various legal woes have an impact on his voter base, or whether it should have an impact on his voter base. I haven't seen as much discourse around what impact, if any, Republicans' efforts to impeach Joe Biden or dig into the bribery accusations surrounding his son are actually affecting Democratic voters or Democratic turnout. It does seem to me that especially post-October 7th, the discourse around whether or not people are going to stay home and the vote for Biden is going to be depressed is much more about his substantive conduct in the Middle East as opposed to some scandal at home. And I do wonder if Republicans at a certain point are getting the sense that they're not getting much juice out of this particular squeeze. And is there a way to talk about this Biden impeachment? I mean, I think there was a time when it felt like, well, Trump's coming under all this legal scrutiny. Let's just throw everything at the wall that sticks. And if everybody is in legal trouble, then maybe that makes Trump seem like less of an outlier, less of a corrupt figure. I don't know that that's working in the same way. Now, I don't know that it's really affecting anybody. I think that the status quo might be that we just don't care as American voters anymore if a candidate is embroiled in a legal dispute. And to the extent that we do, we just don't think that the Biden stuff is anywhere near as serious, or at least as voluminous as the Trump stuff.
You know, this has me, this recalls to mind a story I read in The Atlantic this morning by Adam Rubenstein, who used to work he was a conservative at the New York Times under the op-ed page editor who got fired after the Tom Cotton op-ed. I think this was the guy who commissioned it, actually. And he has like a series of anecdotes showing how impossible it was to work there with the groupthink and the hostility to actual ideological diversity and conservative ideas, et cetera. And he says at one point in the article that it was very clear during the laptop story development discussion that the paper kept referring to it as unsubstantiated, even though it had been substantiated, even though there was nothing to undergird the idea that that the actual information was wrong or Russian or what constructed by Google AI or something. We didn't have that technology yet. That was kind of what they were saying, that it was literally made up, which would have taken it. So was the laptop guy a hired actor? It took a kind of extraordinary series of circumstances, but they all acted that way. This is what he claims, is so many of his colleagues acted that way that was obvious that it was Russian misinformation, and also that they were clearly worried that if they did anything to make it seem plausible or help demonstrate that it was not Russian misinformation, that would hurt Joe Biden. And that was not something they wanted to do, which shows you how the media was handling the story. Yeah, and I was speaking speculatively before, but here are some numbers. Unsurprisingly, the majority of Democrats, 90%, don't support Biden impeachment inquiry. But what we really kind of want to know about is what independents, potential gettable voters, think. And the most recent poll I found was from December 13th. So again, that was not the most recent. Independents clocked in at 45% approving and 50% disapproving of the impeachment process. So about evenly split, but slightly more against the impeachment of Joe Biden. So maybe that is cause, at least politically, for Republicans to keep trying to keep this one alive. Yeah, like you, my sense is that it is something Republican partisans absolutely want, and so Comer and others have to keep going along with it because their base is demanding it. I don't think it's really bringing people over from the independents from that category. And frankly, of all the things that are really sinking Joe Biden right now, it's other stuff. It's age, it's some policy stuff that has the left mad at him, and et cetera. Not just the left, but I take your point. Yeah. More Rising right after this.